Hi, and welcome to Chapter 8, Lighting, Shading, and Rendering. This is the last chapter of the Blender Basic Training course. In the previous chapters, we learned how to model, texture, and animate objects. The next thing to do now is to prepare your scene for the final output. We will be using Blender's new Cycles render engine to set up lights and shaders for our scene. The first thing we need to do is make sure we are using the correct render engine. Click the Render Engine button and select Cycles Render. One really useful feature of Cycles is viewport rendering. In the viewport shading menu, select Rendered. What we have now is an interactive view of how the final render will look like. Here we can rotate and zoom the camera, move the object, and pretty much everything else we can do all while it's rendering. This means that we don't have to repeatedly render our scene each time we adjust a setting or move the camera. However, there is not much to see in our scene as we don't have anything going on. To exit viewport rendering, simply hit Z to activate wireframe mode and hit Z again to enter solid shading. Delete everything in the 3D view. Let's create a plane. This will be our floor. Create a monkey mesh and make it smooth. This will be our subject. Now let's create a light source. Go to Create, Lamp, Sun. The sun lamp is basically a directional light with constant intensity. This will more effectively illuminate our scene. Move it up and give it an angle. Now go back to the rendered view. Notice how everything is brighter. As we are currently in viewport rendering, let's select objects in our scene using the outliner. Select the sun. We can adjust the properties of the sun like its intensity, color, etc. in the Lamp tab in the Properties panel. For example, we want to make the scene brighter. Enter a higher strength value. Notice how everything immediately turns bright. We can change its color. Let's give it a slightly cool color. There's an option, which is enabled by default, to make the lamp cast shadows. You can also change the lamp type by selecting from one of these options. Right now, the objects in our scene are just being rendered white. To add color to our objects, we need to apply materials to it. Select the plane and go to the Materials tab in the Properties panel. Click New. Let's name this material Plane. Let's give it a dark blue color. In the Surface option, you can select the type of shader. For example, we want the plane to be reflective. Choose Glossy BSDF. Now the monkey mesh is being reflected on the plane. We also have a new roughness value that we can change to make it more or less reflective. Let's make the roughness 0.1. Select the monkey mesh. Add a new material and name it Monkey. Change the surface to Glossy BSDF. Give it a yellow color and change roughness to 0.25. Press F12 to render our scene. An error message should appear. This is because there are no cameras in the scene. The render output is basically the angle to which the camera is pointing. Split the view. Let's add a camera. Press 0 in this panel to go to the camera view. Now let's adjust the angle of our camera. Press F12. The scene should start rendering. The quality of the rendered image at this point is below average. Press Escape to exit the rendered view. Go to the Render tab in the Properties panel. Here you can find all the settings that affect the final render. Let's set the resolution to 1920 by 1080. This value below is the percentage scale. Right now it's set to 50%. This means that the final render will be half the given resolution. Let's make it 100%. The frame range specifies how many frames to render if you have an animation. Since we're rendering a single image, we won't have to adjust these settings. To make our render smoother, go to Sampling and under Samples Render, change the value to 250. Remember that increasing the samples value also increases the render time. Render the scene. Notice how the render takes longer but produces a smoother image. To save your rendered image, go to Image, Save as Image. Navigate to your desired directory and give it a file name. Click this button to select the file format and then click Save as Image. This concludes Chapter 8, Lighting, Shading, and Rendering. Thank you and have fun creating 3D artworks.